Welcome, everybody, today to Make It Count, Living a Legacy Life. And I'm so happy today to introduce you to my fellow writer friend, though she writes a lot differently than I do. And I'm excited that she gets to talk to you about her writing journey and her legacy. And her name is Laura Thomas, and she is not just a blogger, though that's where I met you in the blogging world. What's the name of your website, Laura? Is it Laura Thomas?
It's
Author.
laurathomasauthor.com.
Yes, and as you could hear, she is from the UK, but now presently living in British Columbia. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And
Yes.
are you in Vancouver?
About 4 hours from Vancouver. Yeah. 4
North
hours inland, called Kelowna.
Kelowna.
Yeah.
Okay. And that sounds like an indigenous name.
Kelowna actually means grizzly bear.
Oh, yeah, see, there we go.
There you
That would
go.
be scary. I asked my husband if we could go to Vancouver for our honeymoon, but because we got married January 2nd, he said no because of the weather. So we went to Hawaii. But we do plan to go someday.
Honestly, given the choice, I think I would do the Hawaii.
So Laura, before we get into the legacy questions, if you could please tell our listeners a little bit about your family and your ministry. I do want to say that you are an author of Christian romance suspense books, which I think is such a terrific thing because I am an avid reader. So first about your family and then your ministry.
Sure, yes. Well, first of all, thank you for having me.
Sure.
As you said, I'm originally from the UK. We've actually been living in Canada for 26 years. So literally half my life there, half my life here now. And we have 3 grown, wonderful, amazing kids who are all in their 20s, all way smarter than us, doing wonderful things. Yeah.
Oh dear.
And yeah, I homeschooled my kids for 13 years actually along the way. And what else can I tell you? I've been writing since 2006 was when I first put pen to paper. I had a 25-year writing dream that I kept a secret, and that's a whole other story. But yeah, I've been writing since then, had my first book published in 2012. I actually have a Christian teen fiction trilogy. That was actually my first venture. Middle grade short novel, marriage nonfiction book. That's my only nonfiction for newlyweds and brides to be.
Oh yeah.
And then my latest have been Christian romantic suspense novels. As you said, I've just released a series of 3 with Anaya Press, and I absolutely adore writing this genre. It's so fun.
It's so fun. And if you when you go to her website, I have been there many times, and I take her book recommendations and order her books for myself as well as for friends. So she is obviously a good writer, is well read. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, it's one of the novel, if not the most important thing, is to read. Yes,
right. Yeah, because I feel like I pick up their style, not their style so much as just their ability. If they're a good writer, much better than I am, then I pick up some of that goodness, I think.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
I think it soaks in. Yeah.
Hopefully, sure. Yes. And I think it's interesting that you had a secret desire for many years. Were you afraid to say it because it sounded ostentatious that you were a writer?
Well, I think at the beginning I was a child, and so I literally thought that being a real author was just unachievable, like totally not a real life thing. And so I buried that really deep in my teens, and literally never told anybody, not my parents, not my husband. I just thought it's never going to happen. I'll maybe revisit it one day when I'm retired and done everything else, you know. And it's actually my husband who, out on a coffee date one night, he actually unearthed it when we were talking about our future dreams and goals.
Wow.
And he was so shocked. I mean, we've been together since I was 14 and he was 15. Wow. So he thought he knew everything. But I had this little secret.
Wow, that is amazing.
Yeah, so he's really he's my greatest cheerleader. He was the one who turned around that night and said, if you want to do something badly enough, you'll do it now, like make time for it. And at the time I was homeschooling and worship director and all sorts of things, but something stirred within me, and I was like, goodness, he might be right. It might be time. And I kind of just tried, thought if I don't do it now, maybe I'll never do it. So that was the beginning.
Can I ask how old you were then?
Mid-30s,
approximately. Yeah,
mid-30s, I think.
With still homeschooling and small children. I've always been impressed by Bodhi Tenny, because she would write way into the late nights after putting her kids to bed. You don't just wait for something. Sometimes you do if God's telling you to, but how sweet to have that support from your husband. I think as entrepreneurs, which we are when we're writers, it's a very lonely thing, and you and I are pretty extrovertish, and to have to know that we have someone to support us like that. My husband supports me as well financially as well, and
amen.
but emotionally as well, like, what are you doing now, or did you make them laugh when you spoke, and things like that. Which I appreciate. If he were saying, no, you really don't have any talent, then that would be difficult. So I think
really hard.
And you don't have to be married. It could be just a friend who says, I believe in what God is telling you and you should go for it. And I think we need that little kick in the pants sometimes.
We absolutely do. And encouraging is one of my passions. And if I can encourage anybody in following their dream or their desire or their passion or their goal, it's so worthwhile.
So I first met you as a fellow devotional writer on blogs, where I'd read yours or you would read mine. And I've always liked your writing. What is in your mind and your heart when you put pen to paper? Are you speaking to a particular woman on your blog? Or is it all about encouragement? Or have you had problems in your past that you want to help them turn to God for? Or is there anything in particular that you are thinking about when you start?
I definitely have an ideal reader. I'm a member of Hope Writers, and if that's something that they really stress, is the importance of having one ideal reader that you can literally picture and focus on as you're writing. And for me, this has made such a difference. I literally have like a Pinterest board about Kate. She's my ideal reader. I have a Word document with all her likes, her dislikes, her struggles, her fears, her family situation. I've got pictures of her home. It's kind of creepy in a way, I guess. But anyway, she is totally, she's fictional, but she's real to me. And so when I write through my Kate lens of, is this going to be of interest to Kate? Is it going to encourage her? Will it inspire her? And literally, like, if I've written something and I do my Kate test and it's like, this is not even she's not even gonna stop scrolling to read this, then I'll change it, or I'll dump it. Okay. So I really think it's quite important to have that lens. Obviously she's an avid reader because I love talking about books. So that kind of helps.
Yes. And what else about her that you feel your words are encouraging?
Well, she's in her late 40s. She's almost an empty nester. She's living a good enough life, but she has an emptiness. There's a lot of fear there when it comes to suddenly being her and her husband on their own in this completely empty nest. The marriage is all right, but it could certainly be better. She wants to make a difference in the world. Nothing horrific is happening in her life right now, but she knows there's something more. She wants a deeper relationship with God. It's kind of lukewarm. So that's really who I have in mind when I'm writing, I guess.
I think I was talking with another podcaster, I think yesterday, about hospitality, because that's one of my main missions or topics to write and talk about. But I really feel that loneliness comes at different pockets or seasons of life, and that we can be surprised by that. So when you talk about being on the cusp of an empty nest, I think it can hit us and go, wow, we didn't know that our lives were so full of our family and our kids that once they left, especially if they all leave the same year or they all get married the same time or whatever, that we go, well, who are we? What is our identity? We know we're children of God, but we don't feel like that's enough that very day. So I can see where your words would be so worthwhile to encourage someone like that. So what made you want to be a fiction writer? Because that is something I will never attempt. I guess you should never say never.
Never say never.
Yeah, I don't plan on it. Let's put it that way. But it's unique. I've interviewed many authors, but never a fiction writer, and I think it's terrific. So, what made you want to do that?
Well, originally, back when I had my little childhood dream, and then when I started actually thinking I'm going to do this writing thing, I wanted to be Beatrix Potter. I literally wanted to be a picture book writer.
Oh.
That's kind of always what I envisioned myself writing. And I think when my kids were small and I would, obviously, the poor children, I read to them loads, I made them read loads, because I've always been like a bookworm as a child. I was a total bookworm. And I thought, well, this is something maybe I could do. I honestly didn't think I would be able to do grown-up writing, shall we say. For some reason in my head, I thought picture book was kind of where I would be at. So I actually started with the Institute of Children's Literature because I had no clue where to start with this. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to be a writer.
Now what? Exactly.
Yeah. Like I left school at 16 and went into banking. So I have no background.
Wow.
in English or writing or anything other than being a reader. So
yeah, that's amazing. And I do want to mention, in case I forget, that we want to give away the first of your latest series. Is that right? And what is it called?
Yes. Yeah, it's called The Glass Bottom Boat, and it is Christian romantic suspense, and it's the first one in the series. And yes, I would love to give away a signed, personalized copy.
Oh, good. So all you have to do if you want to be entered is to leave a comment here or on Instagram, and we'll tell you more about those details when this is broadcast. So as you know, I like the people I interview to talk about what legacy they feel that they are leaving right now, because I interviewed a 32-year-old earlier this week, and I'll interview, I think, someone in their 70s tomorrow. It doesn't matter what age we are. It's that we are living right now for something that will last for eternity. So, Laura, if I could ask you, what legacy do you want to pass down to those that you know and love?
Now, I have to say, when I said yes to this podcast, I was just like so excited to chat with you, Sue. And I sat down with your questions and I'm like, oh my word.
Oh, come on.
I'm going to figure this out. I don't think I've ever really seriously sat down and thought about legacy, what I'm living and leaving. I have never written it down, that's for sure. So this was really a good exercise for me.
Good.
Yeah, I know. I've been talked my poor husband's ear off all weekend, and in the end, he was like, "I'm so glad you're doing this and not me."
No. Well, let me just say one thing before you tell us what you came up with, because we're excited. My brother Steve is a preacher, but he also writes poetry, and he told me. He's told me it more than once, so now it's stuck with me, is that the written word lasts. Like, I'm a speaker, that's what gives me my greatest joy. That's how God wired me, and that's fine. But he says, keep writing, Sue, because it will last a lot longer. So I kind of know what your legacy is, but go ahead and share what the Lord told you to share with us.
Sure. So I was kind of like playing around with encourager, because even on my tagline for my writing is heartwarming encouragement for your soul. Also bringing joy, because that's kind of my heart, is to bring joy. But I actually landed on, I would like to leave and to live a legacy of story.
Oh, and why do you say that?
Well, quite a few reasons. Well, for a start, it's really through story that I get to encourage and share my joy. I love that Jesus used story so much. Our greatest example. We love to listen to story. And I feel there's just so much power in it. The written word, the spoken word, the lived out word. And I have a verse as well from Psalm 139, which is my favorite Psalm. And in the Message, it says, like an open book, you watch me grow from conception to birth. All the stages of my life were spread out before you, the days of my life all prepared before I'd even lived one day. And I just love the idea of this open book and the Lord just kind of flipping the page to the next chapter and being, I'm holding that book, holding that book of ours, and just us being part of his story, his plan. So yeah, I think story for me is in every area of my life is something I would like to be living and to leave legacy.
I want to have you review what you said because it was going too fast. The written word, the living word. Do you remember what else?
The written word, the spoken word, and the lived out word.
Oh, the lived out word. Oh, we go. Lived out word. Wow. I love it that Jesus was a storyteller.
Oh, yeah, I know, the best.
and I even realized as a child that when I would hear a sermon, the only part I would remember would be the stories and not necessarily the biblical stories. Yeah.
I'm the same. I'm a PK. So yeah, but it was always, and if I'm going to be perfectly honest, even today, I'll listen to a sermon and hopefully I'll glean more. Yeah. But if anything shines for me, it's that application story, that little real life story, or a story about somebody that ignites my imagination. I'm a very visual person, I guess. And so, yeah, I just think it's so powerful.
I know. I guess I should admit that sometimes I'll email my pastor, who's quite a bit younger, and say, if you just want to tell us a story about surfing, that'd be great, because then we'll really remember what you're trying to say. And he has gotten a lot more, I think when they're new, they're afraid to say too much about themselves. Yeah. And now he's been preaching for years and he's great. But I could just sort of feel the sense of the whole congregation kind of sit up and take a little bit notice when he says, Susie and I had this argument last week, when he's talking about his wife, and we go, oh, good, because we all have arguments with our spouses, and it's good to know you do too. Yeah, story is great. I'm going to give you this great quote because I have it tacked to the bottom of my computer. And I got this from Bob Goff, who is a master storyteller, as you probably know. Yeah. Tell a story, live a life to engage others, not make it all about you. We are not the hero. Jesus is the hero. And I thought, that's what I want to do with all my storytelling, that Jesus is the hero, because people go, oh, so you have this great story. I go, yeah, but it's not about me. And I know you feel the same about your storytelling. So tell me how your storytelling is your legacy.
Okay. I mean, I suppose the most obvious way is in my in my written work that I do. I've got, if I can engage you in one more quote here, this one I just absolutely love. It's by Robin Jones Gunn. And she says, a storyteller's job is to find the common threads in this tattered world and hold them out so that a reader will grab and pull until the veil is torn in two and they behold the heart of God.
Whoa, that's beautiful.
It gives me chills every time I read it.
Yeah.
And I think it's just encompasses everything that I want to do, just to engage the reader, to find those common threads. But at the end of the day, to be able to have that veil torn in two so they behold the heart of God, like that has to be the ultimate goal, right?
Right. And yeah, I know people will want to hear that. So I'll put both the scripture passage in the Message, Psalm 139, as well as this beautiful quote that you just read from Robin Gunn. That's kind of how I feel about hospitality. I say, we do this to show off God's heart. I don't say it quite as beautifully as she does, but that's why we do it, because we eventually want them to say, oh, so you invited me, so God would invite me as well. And that's what storytelling does. It invites people into the heart of God. So thanks for sharing that with us. What changes did you have to make, or obstacles do you need to overcome to make this storytelling continue to happen?
Oh, right. Yeah. Well, I think personally for me, I have an ongoing battle, probably with fear and pride. For a start in my writing life, as I kind of alluded to earlier, I was a late bloomer. I had to get my brave on, to be quite honest, and take that next step. I mean, every time you have the written word out there, it's basically bearing your soul for anyone to read. And it is scary.
Right. It is scary because people feel they have the right to criticize you as soon as you put something.
Oh, yes, they certainly do. Yeah, that's absolutely. And then also rejection is very much part of a writer's life. It's a super hard pill to swallow, even still. But honestly, my life is littered with it. I can remember my first rejection letter. I thought that was the end, and that was it. But it's like, oh, now it's just like, oh, okay, another rejection. Let's move on to the next thing. And so it's an ongoing lesson in humility.
Yes.
Also fighting imposter syndrome and the comparison trap and all that comes with that as well. I have to put that all aside and be story. I want to tell my stories, as in my fiction stories that I make up, but also sharing my own story, like what's happening in my own life, and learning to be vulnerable and selfless in that has been quite the journey as well, because I know you said earlier on that you thought I was an extrovert, but actually I'm a bubbly introvert.
Yeah. I saw your face when I said that. I go, I bet she's not an extrovert. She just has a great smile.
Don't get me wrong, I'm loving this. And here I am cocooned in my little office.
Right.
So putting myself out there in any regard as a writer or speaking or anything, I have to push myself. It doesn't come naturally.
Right. What has helped you the most through those feelings, especially like when you get a rejection letter? I framed one of my first rejection letters and kept it for years. Also, one time I got a rejection and I just started crying on the couch, and my middle daughter was little at the time, and she goes, "Why is mom crying?" And she didn't know moms cried. She hadn't seen me cry for him. It just sort of breaks your heart, that, I thought I really had a contract here and it didn't happen.
Yeah.
So what has helped you the most in overcoming fear, rejection? And imposter syndrome is also very real.
Oh, it is very real. I know. I think I just always have to go back to the fact that I am living out what I think God has planned for me. I'm part of his story. I like to think that I have a great idea of, excuse me, how everything's going to go, but my plan is not the same as his plan. So I kind of have to rely on that.
Yeah, I feel like God gives me those opportunities to reset my trust in him. Do you feel that way as well?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, absolutely. And I think he needs to do that sometimes. Honestly, if I got acceptance after acceptance, oh my goodness, like I wouldn't get my head through the door. Like I think, I think he knows that I need to be kept humble. And kept relying on him. I wouldn't rely on him otherwise. I don't think I would necessarily pray over my stuff before I send it out. I would be very full of myself.
And isn't it's so merciful of God to let us trip up at times. Not that I would ever want to ask for failure. Failure comes. But with that, as my brother Hyatt has told me, he goes, well, you learn a lot more through failure, Sue, than you do through success. And I didn't really like that comment.
So true.
But I have lived that comment because it is so true. Not only that, the humility that comes with that, not that you ever want to tell anybody that you're humble, because as soon as you do,
I know, right?
But the humility, it makes you very, I think it helps me mentor better because I'm more sympathetic and compassionate. I was talking about marriage with someone the other day, and I go, "Yeah, I didn't know I had a temper till I got married." And people would get like, "Oh, that sounds terrible." But the fact is, I got my own way for many years.
Right.
And I got a lot of good press as a good person. And Mark just looks at the world differently than I do. And so when I would come up against that, I go, well, that would make me angry. And then I go, wow, where'd this come from? And then God was kind of like getting the sludge up out of my life, and it needed to happen. I'm not sure how we started talking about marriage, but I guess God uses every experience in our lives to show us how desperately we need him.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I mean, with marriage as well, I honestly think that like a marriage ministry is something that's really passionate for my husband and I. Like we love to do pre-marriage mentoring with couples, and we're involved in alpha marriage with our church. And like, not that we have a perfect marriage, but we have, like, I love marriage, and I love my marriage. And our love story, which started when I was 14, and we've been married now for 33 years, so we've been together a long time. And I love that we can share from our own personal love story with other couples. So yeah, that's another area where I really think story can be a legacy.
Oh, it's totally a legacy. I think that when someone won't hear the gospel, like straight scripture, they will listen to your story.
Yeah.
And it's your story, like what you said earlier, comparison pit is such a easy one to slide down into, but it's not anybody else's story. It's the story that God has given you, which
Yeah.
goes back to your favorite scripture
Yeah.
in Psalm 139, in that he made us unique.
Yeah.
We are his manuscript, and I'm not your manuscript. I'm not blonde, I'm redheaded.
Yeah.
And I'm from California, and you're not. And and God has placed these unique gifts in our lives. And yet, especially I think as women, we tend to go, well, gosh, Lord, I think I'm supposed to be Laura, or I think I've had people say, well, I can't do hospitality like you, Sue, so I'm not going to do it, really. And I go, wait
Right.
a minute. We're supposed to do things the way that God has called us to. And there's all sorts of different ways to tell our stories. How would you encourage someone right now who maybe feels like God wants them to use their story, not necessarily in a written form? How would you help them jump off the cliff a little bit?
Oh, sure. I mean, this is something that I'm pretty sure literally anybody could do, right? Is share their story in some sort of a form. Being a storyteller, you haven't got to have, a dramatic experience or huge tragedy or great achievements. Like you said, like, we're all so incredibly unique, which makes every single story fascinating, I think. And that Philip Pullman says, after nourishment, shelter, and companionship, stories are the thing we need most in the world. And just generally, like, just even not even talking in Christian circles, just in general, people gather around storytellers, right? We just, yeah. So even if it's starting with your close circle of family and friends, what I would give to listen to my grandparents, to have them back, to sit them down, and to actually, like, I personally, I would write it all down, but like listen with my 2 ears and go, what was it like to live through the war in London? What was it, like, how was your childhood? I wish I'd listened better. I wish they were still here to tell me those stories. But we can do that now. We can tell stories to the next generation, whoever they might be. There's a place for the painful stories as well, with the right people. We go through things, and I'm sure we go through things in part so that we can really walk with others through those experiences.
Totally.
And tell the happy ones as well. Like, we need joy, do we not?
Do
In this
we
world,
not?
more than ever. So don't be bashful and afraid to share the joy, and listen well. That would be the other thing as well. I think a good storyteller also listens well, because that encourages others to be able to share as well. So yeah.
That's wonderful. We had far fewer people at our Thanksgiving table this year because of the shutdown, and we were outside. There were just about 9 of us. And I had my daughter pick out 2 conversation starters from my book for each person to choose from. And some of the people there were strangers. One was a server at a local bar that I said, "Would you like to come for Thanksgiving?" And he did.
That's
And
awesome.
so we didn't know, but he even brought food. It was hilarious. Some appetizer that he had made himself, about 25-year-old guy. But he was so dear and answered the questions that he picked so beautifully and entered in with the story. Um, and then my husband, who is very quiet, his question was, how are you parenting like in a way that your parents parented you? And he said, well, he said, my folks went to all of our sporting events. There are 5 kids, and I guess I went to a lot of sporting events, which was not necessarily a deep thing, but it was something that spawned storytelling. We went on and talked for another 15 minutes about
Right.
how funny their dad was. All the girls were laughing and telling stories about, oh yeah, Dad, you would run up and down the soccer field yelling Kobe, the basketball player, and we were playing soccer. But the story about that, and of course he was
Yeah.
delighted and we're all laughing. And so story and joy, stories bring joy,
Mhm.
stories bring tears. When I had a group of women who didn't know each other in my living room, I asked them each 2 questions as well. And one was, what did you want to be when you grew up? And of course, you would have answered to be a writer if you had dared to say it then.
Yeah,
But
maybe.
they said such funny things. But then I said, and who are you becoming right now? And 2 of the women going through divorces said, I don't know, but I'm learning who I want to become. So
Mm.
everybody was silent. Then they
Mm.
talked to each other afterwards. And
Yeah.
really, storytelling connects people,
Yeah.
wouldn't you say?
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you know that I enjoy baking and hospitality as well. And
Yes.
one of the main things is like feed them cake and listen to their stories. It's like,
There we go.
you know.
Oh, I'm going to put
That's
that in the quotes. Let me tell you, feed them cake and listen to their stories.
it doesn't have to be complicated, right?
No, it doesn't have to be complicated. That's so funny. Because I just wrote an article for a magazine we both write for.
Yeah.
Who knows if I don't know if they'll take this one, but I did say baking is love, right?
Oh, there you go. Amen to that. Yes.
Amen to that. Well, I hope you share a recipe with us and we'll put it in show notes later because I know people will be delighted
Oh, sure.
to see that. And Laura, this has been so much fun. Did you want to leave anything else or how we can, if the women, men and women listening to this, if they want to hear more about Hope Writers or about how to get started telling their story, or they just want to follow you because of all the wonderful encouragement, um, then you can share that with us. Okay. And it looks like, Laura, your internet went off. So I'm going to just close this off. And I thank you so much. And be sure that you follow her at laurathomasauthor.com. Thanks so much. And you have a wonderful day.